Unfortunately, the CXAM air search radars aboard both Hornet and Enterprise were functioning poorly on 26 October. The Fighter Director Officer, FDO, aboard Enterprise, who actually led the defense of both carriers, was an expert on radar technology but had never used it in battle. Admiral Nimitz, overall commander of the Pacific Fleet, later summed up the shortcomings. Our fighter direction was less effective than in previous actions. Enemy planes were not picked up until they were at close range. The radar screen was clogged by our own planes, and voice radio discipline was poor. Fighter direction against a number of enemy groups with our own planes in the air is a problem not yet solved. 37 Grumman Wildcat fighters were airborne over TF-61 when the first big Japanese strike arrived, but many of them had not climbed above 10,000 feet. When the enemy's second wave came in against Enterprise, fighter direction was also poor, and the cap was still too low to intercept the high-flying Vals on their approach. Santa Cruz was a low point in the fortunes of the U.S. Navy fast carriers. The Battle of Midway in June had been an outright American victory. At the Coral Sea in May, American carrier losses had been heavier than those of the enemy, but a strategic threat to New Guinea and Australia was blocked. In the Battle of 26 October, the U.S. Navy had been outnumbered and outfought. An American carrier task force not only suffered heavier losses, but was forced to withdraw from a vital sea area. But the battle was also the end of an era for the enemy. The American offensive in the Central Pacific began 14 months later, in January 1944, and the combined fleet did not come out to resist it. Santa Cruz was the last time the carriers of the Imperial Navy would actually take part in combat before June 1944. Partly, this was because in 1943, Japan would go over to the strategic defensive. Partly, it was because there would be few American carriers to fight. A decision was made in Tokyo to operate carrier planes from land bases. But it was certainly the case that in 1942, losses of aircraft and aircrew and of sunk and damaged ships had been heavy for Japan. Replacements were not available, and when the Japanese flat tops did come out to fight again in 1944, the comparison with the American carrier fleet would be very different. The communications officer of Hornet, who ended up swimming for his life with other members of the crew, recalled 4 days later a conversation he had overheard in the water. "Are you going to re-enlist?" "Goddamn yes, on the new Hornet." How and why the U.S. Navy recovered, how Task Force 58, the fast carrier task force of January 1944, differed from Task Force 61 of October 1942, will be the subject of this book.